It was a Thursday morning in Phoenix when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened the door, a young woman stood there, holding something small in her hand. "Are you marrying Cole?" she asked. I nodded. "My name is Sloane," she said quietly. "I'm Noah's daughter." For a moment, everything inside me froze. Noah. I hadn't heard my son's name spoken out loud in 25 years. Not since the morning I found my husband Rob on the office floor, the safe behind him open and empty. Not since Noah disappeared without a word. Now his daughter was standing at my door, her eyes steady, holding out a small silver key. "Before I could ask a single question," she said. "He wanted you to have this. He said it's time you knew the truth." I didn't know it then, but by the time I used that key, everything I believed for 25 years was about to change. I let her in without thinking, habit maybe, or shock. My apartment was small but tidy, the kind of place you stop noticing after living alone for years. Sloane stepped carefully inside, glancing around like she wasn't sure she should be there. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, mostly to buy myself a moment to breathe. She nodded. I filled 2 mugs and set them on the table. My morning work still covered it: client invoices, a calculator, a red pen I'd used to circle small mistakes. Numbers always made sense to me. People never did. Sloane placed her backpack on the floor, then the key on the table between us. It was small, silver, ordinary, with the number 218 stamped on one side. She held the mug with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. "My father died last month," she said. I waited, the words sinking in like stones dropped into deep water. She didn't have to say his name. I already knew. "Before he died," she continued, "he told me to find you. He said there were things you needed to know." I looked at her closely, then dark hair pulled back, same brown eyes as my husband, the same tilt of her jaw as Noah when he was her age. There was no denying who she was. My son's daughter was sitting in my kitchen, holding the key to everything I'd tried to forget. I hadn't said my husband's name out loud in years, but sitting there across from Sloane, the memories came rushing back. Rob and I built our life from nothing. We owned a small restaurant on the east side of Phoenix called Cole's Kitchen. He cooked, I handled the books, and our son Noah worked the front of the house. We weren't rich, but we were proud. Rob didn't trust banks. He grew up poor, watched his parents lose everything when their savings vanished during a financial collapse. So he kept cash in a safe at the restaurant. Every week he'd put away a little extra $50 here, 100 there labeled carefully in envelopes. Payroll, supplies, emergency, and one special envelope marked building fund. That one was for the day we'd finally buy the property instead of renting it. When Noah turned 21, Rob taught him the combination. "In case something happens to me," he'd said. I remember the way Noah stood there, serious and proud, memorizing those numbers. Then came the morning that ended everything. I was chopping onions in the kitchen when I heard a heavy thud from Rob's office. When I ran in, he was on the floor, hand clutching his chest, face gray. The safe behind him was wide open, empty. I called 911, but he never woke up again. At the hospital, the police asked who knew the combination. Only Rob, me, and Noah. Noah's apartment was empty, his car was gone. The police said it looked like he'd skipped town. And that's exactly what everyone believed. He'd stolen from us, and it killed his father. That belief became my truth. For 25 years I carried it like a scar that never healed. The sound of Sloane's voice brought me back to the present. "Mrs. Cole," she said softly, "are you all right?" I wasn't. But I nodded anyway and reached for my mug, now cold. She was watching me with a look I didn't quite understand, somewhere between hope and fear. When she mentioned a storage unit, my instinct was to refuse. I didn't want to dig up ghosts that had already buried me once. But before we went anywhere, I needed to know who she really was. "Tell me about yourself," I said. Sloane hesitated, then started. "I grew up in Nogales, just me and my dad. He worked construction, long hours, hard jobs. He never complained. My mom left when I was little. He never really talked about it, or about you." I studied her as she spoke, She had my son's voice when she grew quiet at the end of a sentence. Her eyes were my husband's. After a long pause, I said, "You came all this way just to give me that key?" She nodded. "He said you deserved the truth." I looked at the key on my table, small and harmless looking. "All right," I said finally. "Let's go see what truth looks like after 25 years." The drive to the storage facility was quiet. Phoenix heat shimmered off the asphalt, turning everything into a mirage. Sloane sat beside me, hands folded in her lap, watching the city blur past. Neither of us spoke. 15 minutes later, we turned onto a road lined with warehouses and chain-link fences. Rows of orange metal doors stretched into the distance like endless hallways of forgotten lives. A man in the office handed me a clipboard without looking up from his phone. "Unit 218, he said, circling it on a map. "Back corner, lock it when you're done." We followed the narrow path between units, the sun burning hot on the back of my neck. When we reached 218, I stopped. The metal door was scratched, the lock rusted. My hand was slick with sweat as I slid the key into the padlock. It turned with a small click. The sound echoed in my chest like thunder. I pulled the door up. It screamed on its rails, the noise sharp in the still air. Inside was darkness. A faint smell of cardboard, dust, and time. Then I saw it at the back of the small concrete space sat a green safe. Old-fashioned, square, almost identical to the one Rob kept in our restaurant office. My knees went weak. Sloane stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "Is that the same kind?" I nodded slowly. "Same model, same color." There was a piece of paper taped to the top. Numbers written in handwriting I recognized instantly, Noah's. 091980, his birthday. I reached for the dial. My hands were trembling, but I had to do it myself. Right to 09, left past 0 to 19, right again to 80. The handle gave way with a metallic groan I hadn't heard in 25 years. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside the safe, the air was dry and stale, like time itself had stopped breathing. Stacks of cash filled the shelves, bundled neatly with rubber bands, organized by denomination. Each stack had a small strip of paper around it, the year written in black marker. 1999, 2002, 2008, 2015. The years kept going one after another, all the way to this year. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I whispered, "Help me take them out." Sloane knelt beside me. We set the stacks carefully on the concrete floor, one pile after another. The sound of rubber bands snapping echoed softly in the still air. Hundreds, 50s, 20s, all arranged in careful order. "Count with me," I said. She pulled out her phone, opened the calculator, and we began. My voice broke halfway through, but I kept counting. It felt like an impossible kind of math, adding up lost years, one bill at a time. When the last stack hit the floor, Sloane read the total from her screen. $356,000, she said. I sank down on the cold concrete. It was more than he had taken. More than what was ever in Rob's safe. "He paid it back," I whispered. "Every penny and then some." My hands covered my face. The tears came without warning, hot, shaking, unstoppable. I hadn't cried like that in years. Not since the day everything was taken from me. And now, sitting on the same floor where my son's truth had waited for decades, I didn't know if I was mourning or forgiving. When I finally caught my breath, Sloane pointed toward the back of the safe. "There's more," she said quietly. 3 cardboard boxes sat stacked behind where the money had been. Each one was labeled in Noah's handwriting. "All 3," said Sloane. We pulled the first one out. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, bundled in small groups with rubber bands. Sloane as a baby, pink-faced in a hospital blanket. Sloane as a little girl with a missing front tooth, holding a stuffed rabbit. School pictures through the years, birthday parties, and graduations. Each photo had a note on the back in Noah's careful handwriting. Her first day of kindergarten. Lost her first tooth. She looks just like Mom when she smiles. I kept reading the notes, feeling something twist in my chest. He had saved every moment. He'd documented her life the way a man does when he knows he's already lost everything else. The second box held folders labeled by year, a decade's worth of paperwork, bills, receipts, maybe more. I wasn't ready to open them yet. The third box was lighter. On top was a folded blanket, soft and worn. Underneath it sat a small wooden box, old and scratched at the corners. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside was a silver watch. The kind you have to wind by hand. The glass face was scratched, the band dull with age. When I turned it over, I saw the engraving. To Noah, love, Dad. My husband had given him that watch for graduation. He'd kept it all these years. Even when everything else had been lost, he never let that go. At the bottom of the safe, beneath the wooden box, was a thick envelope. My name was written across it in Noah's handwriting. Just Marion, nothing else. Sloane saw me staring. He wrote that the week before he died, she said. He told me it would explain everything. The paper felt heavy in my hand, the seal still intact. I opened it carefully, unfolding 6 pages written front and back. The handwriting shook in places, like he had struggled to hold the pen steady. He started simply. Mom. I don't know how to start this. I've written it in my head 100 times and never had the courage. But I'm dying now, and I can't leave without telling you the truth. I could almost hear his voice. He wrote about a friend from his youth, someone named Jake, who offered him an easy job. Just one delivery, he'd said. $2,000 cash. No questions. Noah wanted a car. He wanted to stop borrowing his dad's truck. He didn't ask what was inside the box. At a gas station near the border, the car window was smashed. The box was gone. That's when Jake confessed it had been filled with cocaine worth about $250,000. 2 hours later, men found them. Not police, worse. They knew Noah's name, my name, the restaurant, even what Rob looked like. They told him he had 48 hours to repay the money in full. If he didn't, they'd come for all of us. He believed them. He was 22, terrified, and completely trapped. He knew exactly where that much cash existed. Our safe. He took everything. He wrote, I told myself I was saving you, that if I paid them, you'd live. I thought I'd come home once it was over, but when I heard Dad had died, I couldn't face you. How do you tell your mother you killed her husband? He crossed the border, worked construction in Nogales, sent money home under fake names whenever he could. He said he watched me sometimes from a distance, saw me at a bus stop once, saw my apartment lights on at night. He never knocked. Ugh. The money in the safe was every dollar he ever earned. Every time he could have made life easier, he didn't because he believed he didn't deserve comfort. He wrote, I tried to give back what I stole, but I could never return the time. I am so sorry, Mom. I loved you, I always did. By the time I finished reading, the pages were wet with my tears. It wasn't just confession, it was punishment. A lifetime of guilt packed into 6 shaking pages. I sat in silence long after finishing the letter. Outside, the streetlights glowed through the blinds, casting faint lines across my kitchen table. The tea I'd made hours earlier had gone cold, untouched. The envelope lay open beside me, the pages spread out like the pieces of a broken life.
For 25 years, I had hated my son for what I thought he'd done. And now I didn't know what to feel. The anger was still there, buried deep like a splinter. But over it was something softer: grief, regret, and a strange kind of peace. I looked at the folder I'd brought from the storage unit, one I hadn't opened yet. When I did, I found an eviction notice with my old address printed at the top. The amount due was circled in red, $2,400. Behind it was a wire transfer receipt from Nogales, same date, same amount. I remembered that time. I was weeks behind on rent. Then, out of nowhere, the landlord said the balance had been paid. No explanation. I had called it a miracle. But now I knew whose hands had written that miracle. My son's. The same hands I'd sworn I would never forgive. The next morning, I met Sloane at a small diner near downtown. She was already there when I walked in, 2 cups of coffee waiting on the table. Her face looked tired but hopeful, like someone bracing for an answer that might hurt. You read everything? She asked. I nodded. All of it. We sat in silence for a moment, stirring our coffee, though neither of us really drank it. Do you believe him? She asked quietly. I thought about it. I believe it happened the way he said. I believe he was scared and that he wanted to protect us. But I'm still angry that he didn't trust us enough to tell the truth. Sloane's eyes glistened. He said the same thing before he died, that his biggest mistake was thinking he had to handle it alone. She told me about his final days, the hospital room, the morphine, the moment his heart gave out just after he confessed. It mirrored Rob's death, right down to the timing. A circle closing in the cruelest way possible. Can you forgive him? She asked finally. I looked out the window at people walking past strangers living ordinary mornings. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, I said slowly. Maybe it's something smaller, or maybe it's bigger. Understanding, acceptance, that might be enough. After that day, I started to live differently. Not all at once, but in small, deliberate steps. I opened a bank account in my own name and deposited every dollar from the safe. For the first time, I saw numbers that didn't scare me. I fixed the things I had ignored for years, the leaky faucet, the broken cabinet door, the flickering hallway light. Each repair felt like reclaiming a little piece of control. I bought a reliable car that didn't stall at red lights. And when I went to the grocery store, I stopped buying the cheapest coffee just out of habit. Sloane began visiting often. Sometimes we met at coffee shops, other times she'd come to my apartment, bringing her books and her shy smile. She was studying nursing, working part-time at a clinic. I set up a small savings account in her name, a quiet way to help her the way her father had once helped me. On weekends, we cooked together. I taught her how to make Rob's tamales the way he'd shown me years ago, how to spread the masa thin, how to fold the corn husk just right so the filling stayed sealed. She took notes on her phone and laughed when she got it wrong. By the third try, she had it perfect. Each time she smiled, I saw traces of both Rob and Noah in her face. 3 generations somehow surviving one another, finding new ways to begin again. A few weeks later, Sloane asked if I wanted to visit her father's grave. I hesitated at first, but something in me needed to go. We drove across the border to Nogales, the same road Noah had taken all those years ago. The cemetery was small, quiet, lined with sun-bleached headstones. His marker was simple. Noah, Cole, beloved father. Sloane stayed back, giving me space. I stood there for a long time, unsure what to say. Finally, I spoke softly. I read your letter, Noah. I know now what happened. You were scared, and you made the wrong choice, but you tried to make it right. You carried it alone for too long, and I carried my anger just as long. We both paid a price. I knelt down, brushing the dust from his name. You raised a good daughter, I whispered. She's kind, strong, and stubborn. You did something right after all. When I stood, the air felt lighter. The sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't angry anymore. Back home, I hung 2 photos side by side, Noah in his apron at the restaurant, and Sloane in her graduation cap. The same smile, the same blood. A reminder that forgiveness doesn't always sound like a word. Sometimes it just looks like love that kept going.